Welcome everyone to today's webinar. We do a couple of webinars a month. Sometimes they're general overviews for people that are new to ClubExpress or considering ClubExpress as an association management solution. And sometimes, like today, we're going to drill down into a particular module. And in this case, this is a particular way of using a module for single activity events. So this is about the event module, in particular about how to use it in a particular way. And we're going to be starting sort of another series that's more role-based. So we may have webinar that's geared towards membership chairs, so that if you're managing your members, here are the things that you need to touch within the system. Or if you're the communications director, or if you're a treasurer or a webmaster, what are the activities and the parts of ClubExpress that will help you do your job and maybe learn some tips and tricks that you're not familiar with. But today we're going to be talking about single activity events. And these can be events that happen on one day or multiple days. And Samantha will go over some of the differences. Let's take care of a little bit of housekeeping first. All the phones and microphones are muted, so any questions you have should be entered into the chat window. And after Samantha's demonstration, we will revisit the chat window to see if there are any questions that have not yet been answered, and we'll go through those. And this is particularly useful for those people that are watching this webinar as a recording. And speaking of recordings, all of our recordings can be found in a number of ways. You can go to clubexpress.com, click on the Cool Stuff link, and then on the Webinars tab, and aside from seeing the upcoming webinar schedule, you can see a list of the recorded webinars. Similarly, there's a list of video tutorials on the Video Tutorial tab, and within the help system in ClubExpress, if there are tutorials or webinars about the particular topic you're looking at, there's a red icon at the top of the help screen that'll bring you to the recording, and the recordings are all stored on YouTube. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you can click on the subscribe button and optionally click on the bell icon to get notified every time we come up with new content. And finally, if you're using ClubExpress, and particularly if ClubExpress is working really well for your organization, we'd appreciate it if you would visit clubexpress.com/reviews, click on one of these review sites, and leave a review so other people that are evaluating association management solutions can have the benefit of your experience and how it's working with your organization. So today is all about single activity events. So Samantha, are you ready to share your screen?
I sure am. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Our event calendar is really the most popular module that we have. It's really complex, but it can do so much for you. So last webinar, we talked about multiple activity events. A couple webinars ago, we announced our waitlist feature enhancement. We have a webinar on that as well. Today's focus is going to be on single activity events, which are mostly used for meetings, luncheons, member meetups, kids activities that you might have, classes that you might be hosting. They can span one day or multiple days. So a single activity event is one where it's just one activity, whereas of course, if you attended our last webinar, a multiple activity event is something like a conference or a trade show or maybe a family weekend if your members join through their personal lives. A single activity event can be over repeating days. So it can be one event that's repeated maybe on a monthly basis or a weekly basis or even a quarterly basis, or it can be a series of events like an 8-week course that you might sign up for. We're also going to talk about quick events. So a lot of organizations find that creating a full event, going through all of the event creation panels just isn't necessary. So they use quick events more often than they use our full event creation panels. So we're going to go through quick events, just talk about how they're used, and talk about how you can convert a quick event into a full event and why you might want to do that in the first place. So first things first, there are differences in repeating events that you can create. There are two ways that you might create an event that spans a couple of days, either on a repeating basis, maybe one of those dates gets moved around. One of the ways is creating a copy of an event, and that creates a repeating event. And the other way is to create an event that occurs on multiple consecutive or non-consecutive days, and that creates an event series. And we're going to go through each one of those. So the differences that you should focus on are initial setup, editing the event, and registering the event. So multiple date events, when you're making a copy of an event, are configured based on how you envision your users registering. If you're registering for one occurrence of the event, and it doesn't mean that you're registering for all occurrences, you're making a copy of a single event. So for example, for something like a committee meeting, you might have users registering for one of those meetings in a year, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to attend every single meeting or even want to register for all meetings. That would be creating a copy of an event where each event is essentially standalone. From an admin perspective, when you create the copy, you're creating an exact copy at the time. But when you go in to edit one of the events, it's only going to make changes to the event that you're editing. And we'll show that in our event manager. Each event, again, is standalone. It's not a series of events. So for example, if you have a typo in the original, when you make that copy, it's going to copy that in every one that you make. And you're going to have to go into each individual copy to correct that error. If you need to cancel all of the meetings, again, you'll have to cancel them all individually. Now, if you envision registering for all occurrences at once, you want to create an event that repeats on days or an event series. It's useful for something like a class or a course where the user registering would be registering for all occurrences of that course. It's an 8-week course. They're expected to attend all 8 weeks. Now, from an admin perspective, because it's a series and all of those events are tied together, if you make changes, it makes the change for all of the event occurrences in that series because it's technically one event, just one that takes place over a set number of days. So in this webinar, we're going to go through the event creation wizard. Now, many of you will have already been familiar with the event creation wizard. Many of the options that you'll see are pretty self-explanatory. They're very easy to use, but we will go through some of the more complicated points that you might come across. We'll configure a repeating event, and we'll go through what it's like to edit one event out of those repeating events, and we'll configure an event series, and we'll edit an occurrence because within the event series, you can still edit individual occurrences within that series. So for example, if you need to change the date or time of one of those occurrences, you have the ability to do that. We'll register for a repeating event and an event series, and we'll talk about QuickEvents. So I'm already logged in to our Northwest Balloon Club as Martin Smith. Martin Smith is an administrator, so he has full access to the control panel, the back end of the website. I'm just going to navigate to our event calendar, and I'm going to take a look at a couple of the events that I have created just to kind of show you very quickly one point that I was making, which is the difference between an event series and a repeating event. So I have one event that I've created that repeats monthly. It's our events committee meeting. It happens, I believe, on the third Tuesday of every month. I created one of those committee meetings and I made a copy. And you can see all of the copies are individual events. Now, I also have a repeating event that I created that is a 5 or 6 week course for kids. It's called Flying for Kids. Now, this particular event only appears once in my list, but it actually takes place over the course of 5 or 6 Saturdays. That's because it's an event series. That one event and all of the occurrences within the event, it's just one event. It's not a committee meeting where I've created copies of the event. So let's go ahead and take a look at how that happens. I'm going to click Add and Event. Now, right at the top, I am going to leave this as a single activity event. This is not a multiple activity event. Just because it's spanning over a set of days or multiple days, it does not mean it's a multiple activity event. It's still a single activity event. If you would like more information on multiple activity events, we do have a webinar that we have just published on our YouTube channel. So this is going to be our advanced safety training class. This class is going to be held every Thursday for 8 weeks, and each session is going to be 2 hours. So I am going to just create a very quick, short description of this particular class. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. This short description will appear with the event itself. If you have the event in list view, it'll appear on the front page of the event. If you go into the event details, of course, the formatted description is where you might spend a little bit more time. I'm going to categorize this event. All of these categories are categories which I've set up on the event manager page. These categories, they can be color coded. They can be visible on certain calendars if you've had multiple calendars set up within your site. I'm going to categorize this as training. I am not going to limit this event for those of you who are part of parent level organizations and you might have chapters beneath you. You can categorize this event as only for a specific chapter. I'm going to leave that alone. If you are not an organization which has subgroups like that, you won't see that option. Visibility. I want everyone to be able to see this. I'm only going to allow members to register, so there won't be a register button for a non-member visiting my site. I could make it visible to everyone, but offer specific details to members only. I could only make it visible to members, so you have to be logged in to actually see it on the calendar. Or I could just make this event not visible at all. So I'm going to make it visible to everyone. It's going to be visible as soon as I finish the event creation wizard. So I'm going to leave this date blank because I'd just like it to go live immediately. Next up, most of these items are self-explanatory, and some of these you may not see. So for example, if you don't have our mobile app, you aren't going to see a mobile channel option. Again, we do have a webinar on our mobile app. If that's something that you're interested in viewing, you can go to our YouTube channel to take a look at that. So like I said, this course is going to be held every Thursday for 8 weeks. It's going to go through October and November. So I'm going to start this off in October. And we'll select our end time. And let's just say that this course goes from 6 to 9 every night. It's a relatively boots to the ground course. People are really looking to get their certifications and they're committed to coming to this course for 8 weeks. Now, at the top here, we have one option that you're going to want to make sure to check. This event repeats on multiple and/or non-consecutive days. And so right away, we can see that within the panels that we're going to visit, repeating dates is a panel that we need to visit. It's checked by default because we are choosing repeating dates for this particular event. And we need to configure that once we get to that particular panel. Now, the rest of these I'm going to leave checked just so we can take a quick stop at those panels, talk about what they mean. Many of these we kind of talked about when we talked about a multiple activity event, and they're going to function in pretty much the same way. I'm going to say that this panel is complete and save my changes. Now, stating that the panel is complete does not complete the event itself. It just means that I'm done with this page. So I'm going to save my changes and move on. And now I'm in the event creation wizard. I can see a list of all of those checkbox items, and I can see them in tab form at the very top of my screen. I can edit any one of those items by either clicking the pencil icon to the right of the line item or by clicking the tab at the very top of the screen. So let's go to repeating dates. So first I have the initial date that I've set up here. It starts Thursday, October 8th, runs from 6 to 9. Now let's start the next date. I'm going to navigate to October on the 15th. It's going to run the exact same time, 6 to 9. Now, instead of adding individual dates here, what I want to do is just create a copy. And I'd like to make multiple copies. I want to throw all of my dates on there at one time. Now, this course, again, is going to repeat weekly. It's going to start on the 15th because I already have that initial date configured. I only need to start from the second date every week on Thursday. And it's going to end after 8 occurrences. I'm going to go ahead and copy my dates. And now already I can see a full list of every item that I would have created individually. All of these are going to be tied together. When someone registers for one of those events, they're going to register for all of them. And you can also see that there are a handful of icons in the maintain column next to each one of those line items. The first item is an edit icon. We'll get back to that in a moment. The next item is a remove icon. So you can just remove an item entirely before you even go on to register. And you can cancel an item. Now, this would be useful if you just need to cancel one of those events within a course. Once you cancel an event, you do have the option to uncancel it or reinstate that particular occurrence. Now, if you are canceling an item after people have already registered, it does show up within event details as having been canceled. So people can see that something did exist at that time period, but it has since been canceled. This could be for any number of reasons. Maybe the instructor can't quite make it that day. Maybe you've had a lot of people cancel or call in that they aren't going to be there that day, and so you just decide to not hold class that day. Now, one of the things that I want to do is I want to adjust one of these particular items. I want to edit the date and time of one date, Thursday, November 26th.
Samantha, you might want to remove the last one because this is an 8-week course, but you made 8 copies. So you actually have 9 weeks there. So you can demonstrate removing one.
And we'll go ahead and remove that right now. And it's as simple as that. So deleting the item just removes it from the list of dates that you've created here. You can, of course, re-add that date. If you aren't quite sure if you want to remove it entirely, you can cancel it and reinstate that particular event date if necessary. Now, this last date here falls on Thanksgiving, which is a holiday in the United States, and I knew that. So what I want to do is I want to edit this. Instead of class being held on Thursday, I'm going to hold class on Tuesday. One, to give people the opportunity to travel for Thanksgiving if they'd like to, also because no one wants to go to class on Thanksgiving. So I'm going to hold class on that Tuesday, and I'm actually going to make it a little bit shorter just to give people a break. And I'll go ahead and update that last date. And so now I have class basically every Thursday with the exception of the last class, which is going to be held on the 24th. I'm going to say that this panel is complete and save my changes. Now I've got all of my dates configured. I can move on to formatted description or rules. Now, it's important to note you don't have to go in order of these panels. I can jump around and edit different panels as I see fit. Maybe you don't have a fully formatted description ready just yet, and you have the ability to configure everything else, and you're going to come back to that. That's more than fine. So let's go into formatted description or rules. This uses our advanced content editor to create a fully formatted description. You can insert photos, links, you can embed a video that you might have that maybe talks about the course, a video that talks about something else that you're hosting if it's a monthly luncheon. All you have to do is click on panels, wherever your cursor is that adds in the panel. You can insert photos into those panels, insert text into those panels. At the very bottom, you can include event rules. So maybe I want to note that the last day of the course is actually on a Tuesday instead of a Thursday. Now I can format this text as much as I'd like. I won't spend very much time on it. I'm just going to go ahead and do a couple of things there and say that the panel is complete and save my changes. Next up, event contact. Now you can set a default event contact within your event defaults. You don't have to, but setting a default would populate it every single time you visit this page. So if you have one person who tends to be responsible for all of your events, you can add their name in, save a little bit of time. I am going to select Martin Smith as the event contact. I can configure who gets to see his contact information. I could show everything to everyone or nothing to anyone. I'm going to notify him on registration, make him the primary contact, add him to my list of event contacts, and you can see that I can still keep adding people to my event contact list. I can list responsibilities for that particular person. I'm only going to make Martin the contact, and I'm going to say the panel is complete and save my changes. Location. I've configured a list of frequently used locations in my default locations, which is on the event manager screen. So I have a list of locations that I can just choose from a drop-down menu. I can, of course, add a fresh location, but I'm going to say that it's taking place at the club office. This panel is complete. I'd like to show my map link, and I'm going to save my changes. Registration fees and attendance tracking. So many of these we've gone through in previous tutorials, so I will talk about some of the more nuanced options that you have here. Under registration, you have a bunch of different options. It's a course, so we're going to require registration for this particular item, but you don't have to. You can recommend registration. If getting a head count is particularly important to you, you're going to want to require registration and maybe even require it by a certain date. One of the new options that we have is a time that you can actually open and close registration. So previously it was just an open date and a close date. Now you can actually set a time as well. So you can make it very specific, 11 p.m. on a certain night. I am going to open registration today, and I'm going to leave the time blank. And I'm going to close registration a couple of weeks before the course actually starts. Registrant list visibility is just who do you want to be able to see who has actually registered for this event. For sequence numbers, we talked a little bit about sequence numbers in our multi-activity event. It would be assigning a sequence numbers to all of your registrants. This would be useful if you're doing something like a raffle drawing. Every person who registers gets a sequence number assigned to them, and you can just pull those sequence numbers out at random. Is capacity of this event limited? Yes, it is. We are allowing 75 people to register for this particular course. We'll show the capacity when people are registering, and we'll also show how many slots are left. Now, I'm not going to create a wait list. Typically, maybe for a course you might, but we've already talked about waitlists in another webinar, so I'm not going to talk about that today. There is a fee that's going to be charged for this particular event, so I'm going to leave that alone, and we do require payment in advance. Another option that you have is to create a payment schedule. Now, if you have a course that's particularly expensive, you can configure a payment schedule, and you say on what days payment is due from each person who has registered and how much is due. You can even create an initial payment that's a little bit more than subsequent payments. You can send reminders to registrants letting them know that they have an upcoming scheduled payment that they need to pay. You can send blast emails to people who have not yet completed their payment items. You have a lot of flexibility with that. So I'm going to leave in full in advance. Now, immediate payment required. If you are allowing your members to pay by check, you might want to leave that checked as no, because if you require immediate payment, the system creates a countdown clock of 30 minutes from the time someone registers for an event to the time they can complete payment before their spot is relinquished. So if you're allowing people to pay by check, you're going to want to leave that open so that they can still hold their registration spot while they're perhaps waiting for the check to get to you, or maybe they're going to send you cash. Does the fee change after a certain date? If you want to create an early bird price for any item, this would be a great way to do that. So I'm going to say yes, the fee actually does change after a certain date, and I'm going to say that the fee changes at the beginning of September. So we're offering people, around 6 weeks to register for this course and get a discounted rate. If they wait, they'll have to pay a little bit more. Some of these financial items, sales tax rate, if you have sales tax configured within your site, you'd be able to choose it from a drop-down menu. Financial accounts, we did a really great webinar on financial accounts and bank accounts. I encourage you to watch that if you're not already using our financial accounts. They're great for reporting purposes. And of course, if you have our QuickBooks integration enabled, you enter in the QuickBooks item name that corresponds with this particular event. I do want to track attendance. I am not allowing people to bring guests to this particular event, so I'm leaving that at 0. If I was allowing members to bring guests, or if I was allowing non-members to register for this particular item, I can configure what information I want to collect from them, and all of that information is stored in my non-member database. So I'm going to say that this panel is complete and save my changes. Now, who can register and what will they pay? Now, we can see here that I have a fee and a late fee. Now, that's because I opted to charge a different fee for sort of early bird pricing and a separate fee if they miss that deadline. So for my registrant types, I am only allowing active members to register, and I am going to charge them $300 if they register early and $450 for this 8-week course if they register late. I'll go ahead and add that to my registrant types that can register for this particular event. I'm going to say this panel is complete and save my changes. Next up, questions. We've talked a little bit about event questions before. You create a bank of questions in the event manager page that you then choose to add to every event that you create or none of the events. Registration questions and registrant questions, they might seem like the same thing. They're not. Registration questions are asked once per registration. So if you have a member bringing 3 guests with them, they only answer the question one time, whereas registrant questions are asked once per registrant. So that same member bringing 3 guests will answer that question on behalf of not only themselves, but also their guests. So that would be useful for something like food allergies or menu options if you are requiring people to choose a menu item before they register for something. Now, instead of saying this panel is complete, I'm not actually asking anyone questions for this particular event. I'm going to remove this from my event. I'm asked to confirm my action, and now I don't see that question panel anymore. So as you're going through the wizard, if you find I added this item to my list, I don't really need it, you can always remove it. Email confirmations and reminders. There are system emails that get sent out automatically to remind people that they have this event coming up that they've registered for. There's, of course, a confirmation email that goes out when someone registers for the event. You can include additional information, maybe to bring a photo ID or to remind someone that children aren't allowed or pets aren't allowed at a certain venue. You can select when to send your reminders. Once you elect to send a reminder, you then have the option to choose how many you want and the date. Now, these dates are configured based on the start date of the event, but they can be changed. So I'm going to just not send email reminders. Perhaps it's a close-knit group and I don't feel the need to send reminders out. I'm going to remove my email option from my event creation panel. Next up, cancellation or release agreement. Like many things within our events module, you have the ability to create a default cancellation policy, and you also have the ability to create a default release agreement. Now, a release agreement could be anything from we're going whitewater rafting and we're not liable if you fall out of the raft, to we're hosting a really great gala and we're going to be taking photos, video, and you might end up on our website, so here's a photo release. You can use it for whatever suits you. You don't have to have just one release agreement. You can have a default agreement that pretty much covers everything that your organization does, or you can create one on the fly. So I can use a default, or I can create one that is just a custom agreement just for this particular event. With our cancellation policy, you can do the exact same thing. I can even charge a fee if people cancel for this particular class. So let's say that I am allowing cancellations up until the last week of September. And I am going to charge a $75 fee if someone cancels. And you also have the option to notify an event contact when a member cancels registration. That's also a new option that we just recently added. So now the way the cancellation fee will work is the member will get credited the registration cost less the cancellation fee. So it's not really a refund, it's a credit unless you are using refunds to give that money back to your members, but they won't see anything sort of taken out of their account. They'll just see the money going back less that fee that you've configured here. So I'm going to go ahead and save my changes. And the last panel that you'd see is a way to keep your members engaged after the event has concluded. It's a way that you can show photos of your event. You can create a whole custom page for this particular event just to talk about it, to direct your members to it either immediately or after the event itself. So I can create this particular photo album, make it available after the event, save my changes. And now every single panel that I've visited, that I've completed, has a green check mark next to it. Now let's take a look at what this looks like from a member's perspective. Now from a member's perspective, they can see my formatted description. They can see how much all of this is going to cost. They can see that the fee does change right up front. So I know that if I wait until after the 1st of September, it's going to cost me a lot more money. I can see that they have 75 available slots, so no one has registered just yet. I can see when I can cancel, so I have a little bit of time to reserve my spot and cancel it. Now up at the top, I can see that there's a list of every single date and time that this particular item takes place on. They're not separated. So when I'm registering for this particular event, I'm registering for all occurrences of this particular event. It's entirely up to your organization if you have members who may be looking to miss a class or two and they'd like to get refunded for things that they miss. That's entirely up to you. You don't have the ability necessarily to unregister yourself from one particular instance. You're registering for the entire set of event dates. Now I'm going to go ahead and register. And because Martin Smith is an administrator, he's just going to sign up another member. Now, as a member registering for this particular event, they'd only have the option to register themselves. I'm going to select the member just by searching their last name, and we're going to register Jenny Cho for this particular event. Now, this would also be useful if you have a member who maybe has sent in a check and they haven't actually signed themselves up. You can register them as an administrator and apply their payment all at the same time. So let's say, for example, that Jenny sent in a check and I'm trying to register her for this particular class. Because we're before that deadline, she's only going to pay $300. I'm going to go ahead and review my details. Everything looks great. I'm going to complete registration. And I'm going to apply the check that she sent me. Let's say it was check $250. And I'm going to record a check payment. And so now when I'm visiting the front page of the event, not just as an administrator, but even as a regular member, I can see that we have one less slot available because Jenny has already registered. Now let's take a look at what an event looks like that's being copied and how you might do that. So I'm going to go back into my event calendar. And again, we can see that the one event that I created, even though it repeats on multiple days, is only showing up in my event manager one time, that advanced safety training class, because it really is just one event that happens to span over 7 Thursdays and a Tuesday. Now, let's take a look at an item that we've created that is actually a copy. My events committee meeting, my original events committee meeting was created on the 21st, and I've made several copies of it. Now, how about another committee meeting? Let's talk about our monthly safety committee meeting. I would like that to actually continue. We're going to hold those meetings every single month. Safety is very important to the Northwest Balloon Club. The first occurrence of that meeting is tomorrow on July 9th. But I want to make sure that everyone knows that that's going to be a monthly thing. So instead of going into that particular item and having it repeat on multiple dates, like our advanced safety training class or our flying for kids class that I talked about earlier, I'm going to create a copy for a couple of different reasons. One, they're not all the same event. So going to one committee meeting doesn't mean that you're going to go to every single committee meeting. Registering for one does not mean that you're going to register for all of them. Administrators need to have the ability to maybe cancel individual items, change the location of individual meetings. So it's more beneficial for the organization to just create a copy of this committee meeting. I'm going to click the clipboard icon in our maintain column. And right away, we can see a dialog that's relatively familiar. We saw this when we were creating copies of occurrences in our event series. That was creating a series of dates for that event. This is creating a series of events. I'm going to make multiple copies. Now, my original start date, and this is happening monthly, my original start date was July 9th. Now, I could say that I want this to repeat on the 9th of every month. Regardless of what day it is, it happens on the 9th of every single month. Or I could say it was happening on July 9th. Maybe it's going to happen on the second Thursday of every single month. Or maybe the 9th was a fluke and it's actually happening on the first Sunday of every month. I'm going to say that it happens on the 9th of every month. And let's say it ends after 10 occurrences. I'll go ahead and copy my event.
Samantha, before you leave that, there was a question that says, well, could you do it so that it's the second and fourth Thursdays per month? And the answer there is, yeah, you can, but you just have to do it in 2 steps.
Yes.
You would do it for the second Thursday for each month, and then come back and do it again for the fourth Thursday of each month. It only takes you another few seconds to do that, but you can only do one at a time. The other question, I don't recall, can you repeat on the second or last weekday of the month, say the last Thursday of the month?
Let's try making a copy of the boat ride.
Question is, if you do it, say, monthly.
Yes, so you can do first, second, third, fourth, or last. Last being if you have one of those weird months that has like 5 Thursdays in it, you have the ability to do that. You can repeat not just monthly, but on a schedule of months. So if you want to do it quarterly, the first Sunday of every 3 months, 6 months, it's entirely up to you. You don't just have to end after a certain number of occurrences. Maybe you just want to schedule your events out through the end of the year. So if I repeat this and set December 31st, 2020 as my end date, it'll just throw everything on the calendar, fill it up to the end of the year, and I'll let next year's event coordinator worry about creating all of those events. So now when I go in to register for my monthly safety committee meeting or my events committee meeting, I'm only registering for one single event. I'm not registering for all of them. So for example, let's go in and let's take a look at events committee meeting. And again, as an administrator, I'm just going to start registering people. Perhaps I also sit on the events committee meeting, and I'd like to just add some people to this meeting that I know are going to attend. I can do it from the registration manager screen as opposed to just actually going through the event. I can sign up myself. I can sign up another member. Let's go ahead and sign up myself and complete my registration. Now, this is for the committee meeting that takes place on July 21st. So let's go back into our calendar and let's take a look at August's events committee meeting. Now again, this is taking place on August 18th. Let's take a look at registrants for this particular item. We don't have any registrants because each event is a standalone event. Whereas with that event series, when you're registering for one, you're registering for all of them. With the single events that you've just made a copy of, you're only registering for one. Now let's take a look at QuickEvents. Now we spent quite a bit of time going through our full event creation wizard. If you're not already familiar with QuickEvents, this will come as a nice little breather for you. I'm going to add a QuickEvent, and right away you can see a huge difference in the amount of time that you're going to put into creating this. A QuickEvent is one page. You're configuring basic information, registration information, and a location. Now, there are a lot of things to know about QuickEvents. One, you have the ability to actually allow your members to create quick events to throw on the calendar. You don't have to. You can even allow them to create quick events with administrator approval. Quick events can be converted into full events, and I'll talk about why you might want to do that in a minute. Quick events don't have a cost associated with them. So if all of or the majority of your events don't have a cost, you can create a quick event and call it a day. The amount of information that you're configuring here is similar to an Outlook or a Google Calendar event. Quick events also have the ability to choose RSVP as a registration option. It makes it a really quick one-click situation for your members, as opposed to going through and clicking register, reviewing that summary page, then clicking confirm or complete registration. All they have to do is respond yes, no, or maybe, and call it a day. You can configure a location. The things that you can't configure would be special information you want to add into email reminders. You can't configure a formatted description. You're not including those after event photo albums or custom pages. You're not asking your members questions. There are things that are not necessarily superfluous, but things that you just might not need. So for example, if I just want to create a movie night, let's see, maybe we're showing Frozen and people can bring their kids to this particular event. I can still choose a category. I can still choose my visibility setting. I can still choose an event contact. This is currently the default event contact for QuickEvents. What information do I want to show for that particular contact? Do I want to notify them on registration? I'm going to make this registration required. I will talk about the RSVP option. When is this actually occurring? Let's say it occurs next week, Friday, from 6 to 8. Now, if I choose RSVP only, you'll see all of the other options are still available to you. If I choose RSVP only, I decide what responses I want to accept. Maybe I don't want people who are going to sit on the fence about whether or not they want to come to this movie night. It's a yes or a no answer. So I can choose to only allow yes or no. And I can choose to allow comments. Maybe yes, and I'm bringing soda for everyone. RSVP scope. Who do you want to be able to RSVP to this particular event? You can leave it to everyone or active members only. The list visibility, so you can see who's actually registered or RSVP'd, and how many guests they're allowed to bring if guests are allowed. So I'm going to go back and say that registration is recommended. Do we allow cancellations? Who can register? Now, you don't get to be as detailed as with a full event. So if you want to have a detailed list of registrants, QuickEvents might not be for you. I'm going to say that only active members can register. I don't need a quick release. This isn't an activity that I need a release form for, so I'm going to leave that as blank. And location, I can still choose from my drop-down list of locations and save my changes. And now I have a quick event. Now you'll notice that this kind of looks a little bit similar to the full event that we had been creating. My toolbox is a little bit different though. So I can still edit the quick event. We'll come back to this tool in a moment. I can view registrations. I can run reports. I can create those blast emailings that we were talking about. I can share the event to social media. If you've enabled our text messaging feature, I can still send text messages to registrants. And I can cancel the quick event. Now, this magic wand here is, if quick events are something that you use quite a bit, this tool might be really useful to you. Some people use QuickEvents as a way just to get an event on the calendar, to block off some time when you don't necessarily have the time to sit down and go through that event creation wizard, but you just want to let people know that that's something that's on there. You can create a QuickEvent, take your couple of weeks to gather your information, maybe give yourself a good 10 or 15 minutes to sit down and actually create the event itself, and you can convert the QuickEvent to a full event. Now, if you aren't aware of that tool yet, one thing that you may have been doing is creating the QuickEvent just to get something on the calendar, then going back in and repeating yourself and creating a full event for that same time frame. When I convert this QuickEvent into a full event by clicking this magic wand, I'm asked to confirm my action, and I get a message saying that it's been converted to a full event. So what does that mean exactly? Well, it means that now when I go into this event and I show my admin options, I'm back in that full event creation wizard. It also means that any information that I entered in that quick event, whether it's the location, whether it's that short description, all of that gets brought over to my event creation panels. I don't have to enter that information again. It automatically throws it in the right place. Now you're probably wondering, well, what about all of those other panels? There were at least 8, maybe 10, depending on what you like to add to your events. You don't have to worry about that. On that basic information page, which is the first page that you visit when you create a new event, I can go back into that page and I can see right away the only things that are checked are things that QuickEvents had information for. But I can still go back and check all of this information, save my changes, and now I have access to all of those panels to keep editing my event. Alan, how are we doing on the chat?
We have lots of questions.
Good.
In no particular order. Someone says, I've been using repeating dates to create our monthly meetings with our regular meeting location. But now with COVID, the past couple of them have been virtual. Is there a way to only change one in the series to not use that location and to, say, include the Zoom login information for that one meeting only? Or is it best to just delete that date from the series and create a unique one for that date? Well, if you are doing them as a series that has a one event that occurs over multiple days as opposed to copies of the event, yes, you can go in and change any one. So forgetting about COVID for a moment, if you find that the school that you're going to hold your class in is going to be closed on that date, we need to move the date, you can go in and edit any of the instances. Do you have anything that you might want to add to that, Samantha?
Yeah, and you have the ability to cancel, you have the ability to change the time, change the date. It's great that he was already using it though. Yes.
Or the location. So you could just change the location. It's not at our clubhouse, it's going to be virtual, and then you just put in the information there. And then it's probably a good idea to use the emailing function to say we're going to send an email to those people that are registered for this event, and here is the URL and the password and such for that particular instance.
Yes.
So
and we just added a few new emailing distribution lists that are unique to emailing within events. So if you're not familiar, when you're emailing within an event, you have access to several distribution lists that are unique to that event. So just people who have registered, people who have registered who haven't paid, non-members who have registered, things like that. So it's worth it to use that feature.
Yeah, and this goes into another question is, well, can you have additional reminders? Well, you've got general reminders that are set up as the event, but if you want to send out a reminder saying, on Thursday we've changed the time or something like that, or remember to bring your lunch with you or whatever you're going to do, this is something that you can do just by sending out a blast email. But again, this isn't done from the emailing section of the control panel. This is done from the email icon in the particular event itself. So this is email for that event.
And you can configure the email to go out on a specific date. So if you find that 2 reminder emails that we sort of include are not enough for your members, maybe they need more poking and prodding, you can go in and create as many blast emails as you need, set to go out on certain dates. You could even just opt to use blast emailing to send out those emails as opposed to sending out the system emails that are the reminders.
So there's a question here. If you're opening and closing registration, what is the default time if the time is left blank? And the answer is that it's 12:01 a.m. is assumed, and it is whatever the time zone is for the club. We have a question that says, our club uses an external registration system and an external payment system. Can this section be configured so it doesn't display in an event? And you can choose, as far as the registration type, you can choose that it's an external system. You have a link to the external system.
That's useful not only if you're using another system for your events like Eventbrite, but it's also useful if you are putting events on your calendar that are maybe community events or events from a sister organization where you want to direct them to that organization's website in order to register for that event.
There's a question that you already answered. Can you add a panel back after you removed it? And you showed that by going into the basic info and just checking on the panel. Here's a question that's kind of a delicate question that says, can registration questions be reordered after an event is created? The answer isn't going to be specific to event questions. It's going to be specific to questions in general, on surveys, on a bunch of other kinds of questions. You don't want to do that. You can probably do it until the first response has been made. Because if you start adding or removing or reordering questions, what question did somebody answer yes to? Or it gets very ugly very quickly. It's like adding questions to a poll after people have already voted. So you should really think about your questions and not change them once responses have started to come in. Can reminders go out prior to each event in a series, not just the first one? This is in our wish list, and we know it's being worked on, but it's not currently available. Let's see. For reminders, there are two options to remind those who have not registered and those who have registered. And Samantha just showed that you can send out a reminder email to all the people that have registered, all the people that have not registered, all the people that have registered but have not yet paid, et cetera, et cetera. And you can obviously customize the content of each of those emails. Is there a way to record regrets when someone is aware of an event but cannot come and they want to stop the reminders to register? There's no way of opting out of an email to say, stop reminding me about this thing. If you went into something like that, it would have to be much more complicated, because under what circumstances do they want to stop being reminded? Someone says, I can't find where in the system the cancellation fee appears. Also, the cancellation fee is not per person in a single registration, but only a flat amount. You want to just jump over to cancellation fees?
Under cancellations.
Well, they want to see where the cancellation fee appeared, and cancellation fee is not per person in a single registration, but only a flat amount. This would be per person, per registrant.
Per registrant, yes, it should be.
Right. They say, any thoughts on permitting a post-event survey for feedback on the event? You can turn on the after, click on the after event. And what you can do is you can do a page that's like an event report page, which typically would be photo albums and things like that. But I suppose you could set it up as a survey of some sort, a page that then links to a survey. You could certainly do that. That's the after the event. There's a question about, is there any way to use formatting for event rules? And currently, no, I don't think the event rules allows for
No, it's just the description.
Someone says, we have a 5-day conference with various meals and activities within those days, and the registrants need to register for the conference and select each activity. How do we set this up? You go back about 2 weeks and you look at our webinar on multi-activity events, because that's exactly what Samantha demonstrated. So that's the difference between a single activity event and a multi-activity event. So multi-activity event, you could say, okay, we've got these 3 sessions in the morning, and then you can register for lunch and the optional dinner, and I want a t-shirt and a coffee mug. That's all done with multi-activity events. How do you find the answers to questions that people have been asked during registrations?
Sure. So we have a handful of reports that we can run. We have registrations with answers. event attendees with answers. All of those are going to be answers to the questions you've created. I believe event registrants with answers separated by questions, attendees grouped together with their answers so you can view it either by question or by group of attendees. We have, what is that, maybe around 6 different reports that you can run just based on the questions that you've asked.
Okay, someone says, after a cancellation fee is applied, I can't find it in the membership profile. You should be able to see it in their transactions. One thing that was kind of cool when Samantha was showing Martin added Jenny Cho, and it was a $300 fee. What you may not have noticed was that this club also has the cash discount feature clicked in. So there was a percentage that was actually applied to her account. So she actually paid $300, but was only charged. She sent in a check for $300, and she would have gotten a credit for the extra money that she had sent in. Let's see. It says, if you want registrations to be repeated for each meeting, but have room for more registrants after the class has begun, can new people register at a subsequent event? I don't know. You can change the capacity at any time. I don't know that you can change. I think the capacity is for the series and not for an individual instance. You want to just check that to see if you can edit the capacity for that instance?
So let's go back into our event calendar here. And let's take a look at Flying for Kids. So the capacity that we have for this particular item is 50. And there isn't a way under our dates to change the capacity of any one item.
Okay, let's jump over to another good question. It says, can the automated email reminders be customized? It says, I don't see that in the system email list.
Oh, we can actually do it from the event calendar as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so under configure email reminders, it just takes you right to the email reminders associated with events. So we've got the one email that would go out to all members to remind them about this event, and the one email reminder that would go out to just people who have registered. And you have the ability to edit it in the same way that you would any other system email.
And they say, what information is sent out in the email reminder? So go back into that one, into the email reminder. And so what it's doing is putting in the event location, the short description, the additional information, and things like that. We are running over. We actually got to cover a lot of the questions. So we thank you all for coming to today's webinar, and we hope to see you in future sessions. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.